Hi, friends. I am so excited to be doing this live interview. This is probably going to be my favorite thing from this year with one of my favorite people, and I'm super excited to share him with our audience. And I know he's going to bring some amazing nuggets to you guys. But, Wayne, and a big shout out to Aaron Luden if he's watching, because he was the connection between us, right? And I'm
Yes.
super grateful for that. But guys, I want to just introduce Wayne. His mission is really to empower people to be all that they can be and just to form a life that they truly live by design, right? And that's something we talk about all the time. He's dedicated his life to developing solutions and strategies that make such a significant impact on people. And he's made such an impact on myself and my team. If we go back to when I hired you, Wayne, as my personal coach, it was like when the pandemic hit, and I'm like, hi, you don't know me, but I need help.
Amen.
Yes. And ever since, he's been such an incredible asset to me and my team. But, he's called the empowerment coach for a reason. The entrepreneur's mentalist is another name that we call you. And, he has a huge heart to really coach people and lead them to build a better business, but to be heart servant leaders. And that's something that, I had a hard time connecting with a coach for a long time. But when I met Wayne, it was instant because he truly empowers people to really actively engage in their people, to really build people. And it's all about that legacy that I want to leave too, just leaving a mark on people's hearts and continuing to grow. So I'm really excited to bring you on the show today. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to do this. I'm thrilled. And, one of the things you were saying about what I love about you is like when you first reached out to me, it wasn't like, hey, will you take this and go take care of my people? It was like, hey, let's work with me so I can be a better leader, etc. Which is awesome. So yeah, you're incredible, my
Absolutely.
friend.
Thank you. Thank you. You've changed our lives, and I could not be more grateful. And it's no coincidence that the business really took off the minute I really started working with you. So I'm excited. He's starting to coach with my team. We're doing weekly calls now, and everybody's just really engaged. And I'm so grateful for you. But Jody and I sat down yesterday, and we're like, what are some of the best things that Wayne has told us over the past year that we really want the audience to hear? And it was so hard to narrow them down. So this is going to be very conversational because you always are spewing nuggets that I know the audience is going to be able to really write down. So you guys, this is going to be fire. You don't want to miss this. So I want to just dive deep in, Hero Nation. I really want you to tell us, where did you come up with that name for your coaching program and, kind of the mission behind it?
Yeah, well, as you know, most great things come from tough places or like hard times. So for me, it was about 12 years ago that everything on the outside looked really good. And yet on the inside, there's all this unalignment and turmoil and everything else, right? And I literally, at that point in my life, I had an affair. I screwed up my business. Like I lost everything to the point where, laying on the floor of a vacant building, getting ready to take my own life. And I had this moment where I realized that nobody was coming to save me. And it wasn't that people like didn't love me or anything. It was just it was so clear to me that the only person that could save me that moment was me. And I had two options. I could either check out, which I really felt like was probably the right thing to do in a lot of ways, right? I really believed that my family was going to be better off. Everybody's going to be better if I just got out. And yet there's this little voice in the back of my head that said like, or you can save yourself. And I wish that I could say the next day everything got better. It was a journey, and yet I made the decision to really be my own hero. And that goes back to what you were saying earlier. My goal isn't to save anybody. My goal is to help empower people to be their own heroes, so they can save themselves and then help other people go on and do the same thing. So that's really where that came from. Hero Nation is like raising up heroes. And when we say it all the time, I'll become my own hero because my soul demands it. My family deserves it. and the world is starved for it. So it's been this awesome journey so far. So
I love that. I love that you are so vulnerable and share that, that you went through that yourself and now really helping people to make those decisions to empower themselves and be their own hero. So I love that. But, something I love about our coaching calls is it's so different that you actually let me tell you what I'm frustrated with or what I need help with. And we kind of guide conversation. It's not really a checklist. And,
right,
you have
amen.
like it's such good information and during this time that's so uncertain, right? You never know
Yeah.
what questions are going to come up, but what are some of the things that you think people in general and not necessarily even in our industry, right? Because you kind of coach a little bit out of our industry too.
Yeah.
What are some things they should focus on right now to really stay motivated during these times?
So, wow, what an easy question. Thank you. Thank you for just softballing this
Yeah,
conversation. Yeah, yeah,
that's what I
yeah,
do.
super
I
easy.
do.
Yeah, yeah. So here's one of the things that I've realized, or at least from my perception, I see right now. Um, there's no easy path for most people right now. So, like, you've just got to kind of let it out of your mind. Like, there's no easy road that I'm just missing out on. It's gonna be hard, right? Yet choose your heart. And I know that like I'm the worst motivational speaker because I'm gonna give it to your real in a sense. But what I want people to realize is it's gonna be hard, yet you get to choose the hard, right? So people say, it's hard to be rich. Yeah, it's also hard to be broke. You know what I mean? Right? It's hard to be healthy. Yeah, it's also really hard to have to be totally out of shape and have horrible health. So it's gonna be hard right now. Your cheese has moved for most people, whether you own a restaurant or real estate business, you're a chiropractor, the cheese has been moved a little bit. Your job is to go find where the cheese is right now and to lean into it while everyone else is complaining. And I think that when we look at that, in the way to find the cheese right now, the way to find the opportunities right now is where's the pain, right? Where's the pain? Where's the struggle? Who can you help? So when you find the pain, what pain is your clients having? What's the struggle in the world right now? When you can figure out that, that's where the opportunity is, right? Solve big tough problems, and there's big awesome rewards. But I really believe the biggest thing right now is you're gonna have to do the work. There's no simple answers right now, right? There's no simple solutions. But choose your heart and lean in and ask yourself a year. Here's what we talked about a year ago. But when the pandemic hit, it was there's gonna be two kinds of people. There's gonna be people that look back, and there's people doing it right now, looking back and going, wow, I have a lot of regret. Right. Like I waited for things to get normal and I lost a year of my life in a lot of ways. And there's other people that go, that was tough and I'm really proud of myself. So who do you want to be a year from now? Do you want to be really proud of yourself, or do you kind of want to, just be stuck where you are? So no easy solutions right now, I don't think.
No, I love that message. And that it definitely there's no get rich quick, right? Real estate is wild right now and it's crazy in our industry. So choose your heart. That's such a good nugget. That's a writer
Yeah.
downer for sure.
Yeah. There you
Uh,
go. Yeah.
Something that you've really helped my team with, especially my sales team, is the idea, this philosophy of tackling tough conversations today. And I want you to kind of share a little bit more about that with the audience that's listening. And this is something you tell us every time on a coaching call is tackle those toughest conversations today.
Man, how isn't it? Let me take a step back. Who taught you how to have tough conversations? Like, if you're watching this, think about that. Like, who taught you how to have tough conversations? And most of us learned like our best negotiating skills, quite frankly, on the schoolyard, right? It was like you were 8, right? And you figured it out. The problem is most people haven't progressed much further beyond that. But here's what I realized. I realized that there's generally two kinds of people out there. There are jerks to just tell you how it is, and they're like, I'm just being honest. And then there's other people that struggle with tough conversations. Most people struggle with tough conversations. So the goal is not to go be a jerk. The goal is how do I get really great at tough conversations? And what you're referring to is really interesting, that it's such a hard thing. And yet the number of tough conversations you're willing to endure is in direct proportion to your level of success. So the number of tough conversations you're willing to have as a leader is in direct proportion to the level of success you'll have in your life, in your business, everywhere else. So people say, well, that makes sense. And yet I really struggle with tough conversations. And I think most people struggle, at least for me, I struggled with tough conversations because nobody ever taught me how to have tough conversations. There was no role model. Nobody ever walked me through it. And what I realized is most people think they just are bad at them. And the reality is they're not broken. They just haven't learned the skill. It's like someone saying like, I'm bad at riding a bike, and yet they've never tried before. So it's like, it's going to take a minute. It's not a personality flaw. It's just a skill set that most people haven't developed. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah.
So I think our goal is really to equip people, with conversation pathways and how do you do it. And the more equipped they are, the more they're able to do those. And like you said, one of the things that we talk about all the time is, do you want to suffer once or do you want to suffer twice? And most people suffer twice. I had one of my clients who needed to fire somebody, and she literally avoided going to the office for like 30 days. Like she would go like early in the morning before that person came to work, or she would go in. And I was like, why is every coaching call in your car? Like, what are we doing? And she's like, she literally wasn't going to the office because she didn't want to have this tough conversation. So like there was a month of suffering and then a 5-minute conversation of suffering. So like she had all this suffering and she still had to suffer. So when I think about tough conversations, I go, do I want to suffer twice or do I want to suffer? You're going to suffer once, right? You're going to have the conversation, but do we want to suffer twice or just once? So that helps me when I'm resisting a tough conversation. And I think it's just really important for people to recognize it's a skill set. You've got to get more equipped around that. And that's what it is for most of us.
Absolutely. And that is 100% something that I struggled with, right? And you always ask me, what are the tough conversations you have to have today, right? So that you stop suffering. And I would be that person hiding in the car, like, I don't want to hurt their feelings. And it's been such a breakthrough to have the strategies to be able to just handle those conversations up front. And, like you said, not be a jerk. And, just Brene Brown puts it perfect. And something I did with the team last week was talking about tough conversations when you talk about courage. And, she says being unclear is being unkind, right? Clear is kind. Clear is kind. And most of the time when you're avoiding a tough conversation, it's because you say you don't want to hurt their feelings, but it's really you're hurting your own. You don't want to hurt your own feelings, right? You don't want to experience the pain of speaking and saying something tough. So you avoid it. And then in return, it ends up, causing resentment because you've never actually said exactly what you need to say. And then it's just, you're suffering. You're in that suffering cycle. So you've been so amazing to help me work through that as well. And knowing that the tough conversations are the most important thing in leadership and the most important thing in life. For sure.
What do you think was your biggest paradigm shift around tough conversations? Like what was kind of you looked at it this way and now you look at it this way? What was one of those shifts or like a limiting belief maybe you changed?
I think the biggest thing for me was always, I didn't want to hurt people's feelings, right? And but a lot of times I had these expectations in my head that I wanted them to grow, but I wasn't being clear to them. And, I have an amazing team that all want to grow, that all want to succeed and all want this company to grow. And it's like, I have to tackle those conversations up front because they're just going to keep doing the same thing if I don't help them. And I'm not helping them by avoiding them or not having the conversation up front. So I actually saw it as like my inability to have the tough conversation is actually hindering the growth of my people. And that's the biggest thing. So I love that. So going into kind of the 4 principles of communication, you have 4 principles that we talk about, and I love these and that you've shared with me. So I kind of go into that and, what that looks like for somebody when they're communicating, especially in these trying times.
Yeah. So you're going to have to remind me what the 4 are because I have like 4,000. And I think I was like invoke reality, provoke learning. Are those the 4? Okay. I just want to be sure. No, you're good. And here's I think that what's so interesting about this is like the more equipped you are around this, the more powerful they can be. And you realize, like you're saying, tough conversations are such no conflict is actually a really bad sign. right? So like what I'll tell sometimes if I'm having a tough conversation with somebody, it's like, if I'm not having tough conversations with you, it's because I don't care about you and I don't think you're going to last here. Right?
Right.
Like, I may not say it quite that bluntly, but it's like, hey, me having tough conversations with you is actually an act of love, not
Mhm.
the other way around, right? So
Right.
4 are, and these come from Susan Scott, and she shares her 4, which is, the definition of a tough conversation is where you interrogate reality. What's really going on? I'm on this side of the beach ball. You're on this side of the beach ball. How do you're seeing blue, I'm seeing red, whatever it is. Sometimes I really am seeing red. Right. But like we're on different sides of the beach ball. How do we get to the top, look down that circle, the white circle at the top of the beach ball, and see what's really going on? So how do we interrogate reality? What's really going on?
Mhm.
Without a leader is someone who can present or interrogate reality without a big emotional weight, right? So, and that is a skill that takes a minute to develop. The second key is the goal of a tough conversation is to provoke learning. Like, I want to learn, you want to, what's really going on here? What's the source of the conflict? We really want to figure out what type of conflict is this? What's going on? Um, Tackle our tough challenges, and then number 4 is the real goal is to enrich relationship. And enriching the relationship might mean I have to fire someone, and yet I want them to know that I care, and I'm doing my very best to set them up for the best life that they can have. So it's going through those and realizing that in order to have a great tough conversation, I've got to be, like you're saying, willing to be vulnerable and not attached to the outcome. I've got to be open and present in that conversation, which is tough.
Hmm. Absolutely, absolutely, and those are things that have definitely helped me get through those tough conversations. And I know a lot of people
Yeah.
listening, right? When you're dealing with your clients and having that tough conversation is
Yeah.
so important to hit that head on, and
Yes.
remembering those 4 principles that it's always coming from love and coming from a place of
Amen.
growth. And so I love when we talk about these tough conversations because it's something that's been my number one to overcome in leadership. So kind of, can you share with me when we're talking about saying no, which is one of my favorite topics?
Amen. Yes.
Another thing that I personally struggled with a lot before you and I started coaching through that is, unless it's a hell yes, it should be a hell no. And
Yes. Amen.
the power of saying no, there really is truly a power in that, and something you've coached my sales team through. So, kind of tell us your philosophy around the power of no, and some tools and techniques to get through that.
Yes. Well, and if we have 6 hours, we can really
Yeah.
go there. Because this is such a huge one, and what makes you awesome also can have like a hidden blind spot, right? We talked before. So you're willing, and Jody and everybody else, like the willing to like want to help everyone can
Mhm.
also like kind of mess you up at the same time,
Yeah.
right? And especially for salespeople and everything else, like we feel like we have to say yes to everything and all this, and it really messes us up. So I think if we look at that, there's a couple principles underneath that are most important. Um, it's easy to say no when I'm clear on my yeses. It's really hard to say no if I'm not clear what my yeses are. So
Hmm.
step one when I'm working with someone is usually figuring out what are our clear hell yeses. And then usually when we get really clear on those, like where am I going and is this in alignment with that? But if I'm not clear on where I'm going, then it's really tough to make decisions. But if I go, here's the lighthouse I'm headed toward, here's my yeses, here's the things that are in alignment with that. Anything else that comes in, I can go, is this an alignment or is it not? So I think it starts with knowing what my yeses are. So I think that's principle one. Principle two is, and I love that. Who was it? Jay said this in the book. The one thing, actually, he said in a podcast, but he said every yes has to be defended by 1,000 no's.
Hmm.
Right? Like think about it, even right now, there's 1,000 other things that you and I could be doing at this moment, right? There's a lot of things we said no to be here. Every yes has to, and I love to use the word defended, right? Like every
Hmm.
yes has to be defended by 1,000 no's. Whether that's going to the gym, going on date night, whatever it is. So recognizing part of my job is to defend my yeses. These are the yeses that are going to give me the life that I choose to have, and it's my responsibility to literally ward off and defend all the attacks that are coming to try to mess me up, if that makes sense. So I think that's
Right.
part of that. And then the third thing is, like, most of us just don't have 5 or 6 ways to say no. So we use really crappy ones. We use things like I'm too busy, which is a horrendous excuse because leaders aren't too busy. They just choose to do different things, right? So like I'm not too busy. I'm just intentional with my time. So most people have a hard time saying no just because they don't have several ways of saying no that work, and I love when we go through some of those because I think those are fun, and I can share some of those if you want me to, but
Yeah, let's do it.
realizing no is a life skill. Like being able to say no well is a life leadership skill.
Yeah, give us some of those good ways to say no, because I know this is one that a lot of people listening are probably struggling with.
Yes, amen. All right, so first thing is, and there was having a couple of tactics is really good, but one of my ones, I'll use some of them that come to mind. Man, I wish there was two of me, and yet I've already committed to this. I love that,
Mhm.
right? Man, I wish there was two of me, yet I'm already committed. I would love to do that, yet it's not in alignment with my commitments for this quarter. So if you
Mhm.
want to, let's circle back around this, next year or next quarter. Another way of saying, I would love to do that. Yet I know that I would say yes now and end up letting you down based on my other commitments. Right.
Yeah.
So I'd rather like let you down now than really screw up our relationship later when I'm not able to fulfill. I wish that was something that was in alignment. It's just not for the time being. Another thing I'll say is, my calendar is booked, almost a quarter at a time. So if we want to put this on, something on the calendar, 2 or 3 quarters from now, then I'm open to looking at that. Another one I love is, oh my goodness, Amanda, I would love to help you with that. And yet Brad is so much better at that than I am. Like Brad's the dude you want to talk to. Like I wish that was me, and yet Brad's the expert, right? Like, and I love that one for leaders, you know what I mean? Because you're like, I love to fix your email, right? But like call the email company, right? Like I love you, but like, why are you bringing this to me? So I think, having some of those is great. You know what I mean? So, and then getting away from, and this is a huge one, getting away from being overly apologetic and moving up and into gratitude. So overly apologetic is, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry that we're not closing today. I'm so sorry that I can't help with this. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Right? You start feeling Canadian after a little while. Right? I'm so sorry all the time. Right? I grew up in Canada, so I can say that. Right? But my challenge for most people is move away from being overly apologetic and up and into gratitude. So it sounds like, Amanda, I'm so grateful that you understand that the market's a little wild right now, and we're not going to close today, but we will be able to close by Tuesday. I'm so grateful that you understand what's happening in the market. I so appreciate your understanding around this. Thank you for being gracious with me, right? So moving away from overly apologetic and up and into giving gratitude can totally change that. Make sense?
Yes.
Instead of I'm sorry I can't help you, I'm so grateful that you appreciate like what I'm focused on right now and that this is in alignment.
Absolutely. I that's something that I have taken away from our coaching so much, because I know a lot of people listening to, can tend to be, I would tend to say yes to way too many things, overcommit myself, and then, spend the next day trying to be like, okay, what can I cancel and not feel
Yep.
bad about or shift around, because you kind of overcommit because you don't have that question in your head. Is this in alignment with what I'm doing today? Is this in alignment with what I want to accomplished by the end of this week? You have to say
Mm-hmm.
no in order to say yes to the things that are going to move you forward. So that's been a
Amen.
huge transformation for me as well. So that's big.
Yeah.
Something else that's been a big transformation for me is the idea of an ideal schedule or an ideal day. And, this is something you and I have worked through. You worked through with my leadership team, with the sales team, but kind of give me an idea of, and everyone listening, an idea of what is the ideal day philosophy, and how does that really equip you to helping say yes to the right things and say no to the
Yeah.
things that align.
Man, I think so much comes down to, let me say it this way. I think so much of it comes down to our schedule, and so much of life comes down to, are you the driver or are you the reactor? Most people are the reactor all day long, especially in our industries, right? They show up to work and they just react to the email, the text, right? They're in reaction mode all day long. And what I've discovered, or what I believe is true based on, the thousands of people I've been able to work with, if you stay in reaction mode most of the time, it leads to bitterness. It leads to depression. It leads to resentment. It leads to burnout. So for you and me and everybody watching, there's always going to be a part of your life that's reaction, right? Like there's always going to be part of our life that's reaction. And yet I believe that at least 60 to 70% of your day needs to be you driving, or we're going to get burned out, depressed, resentful, whatever it is. So are you driving the day, or is the day driving you? And this whole thing of time and self-management is critical. And it all starts with, time management doesn't work if I don't know what my priorities are. So it starts with getting clear of what my priorities are, and then building a schedule that matches my priorities and my goals. Here's what's so interesting. How many people do you know that hate their schedule?
Oh, a lot of people.
Like
Majority.
everybody, right? Like,
Yeah.
And I heard someone talking about this the other day. He goes, "Isn't that so weird that people hate their schedule? If your schedule lines up with where you want to go in your life, then we would love our schedule." So you look at your schedule, either this lines up with where I'm going, or this doesn't line up with where I'm going. But it's so weird that we would resent our schedule. It should be the map. It should be, hey, if I do this, right, each day, if I do this week 52 times this year, I'm going to get where I want to go. If it doesn't, break that thing down and let's recraft it. But resenting your schedule is such a weird paradox. Really, it's self-resent, and there's no reason we should resent it unless something's out of alignment, if that makes sense. So I think that's where it starts. Does my schedule match my goals?
Right.
And then it starts by, here's another portion on this, is most leaders, I assume it's leaders that are watching this, right? Most leaders live in a state of hallucination. Leaders, I love you. You're crazy. I am too, right? But we live in a state of hallucination. The hallucination is, I've got 80 hours of stuff to do, and gosh darn it, I'm going to get it done in the 60 hours I'm working this week.
Yep.
Right? It's 80 hours.
Guilty.
And we live in this.
Yeah.
Right, yes. I'm preaching to I'm going to go back and watch it again, right? I'm preaching to myself. But like, we live in this constant state of, I'm going to get 80 hours of stuff done in the 60 hours I've committed to working. And we live in this state of almost self-loathing for like decades.
Right.
Now, I want you to be a high achiever. I want you to go all in, and want you to have big dreams. All that is critical. And yet get out of hallucination and into clarity, right? So out of like this vague, I've got so much to do, into here's what I'm choosing to do. Here's what I'm choosing how to do it. And I think that's a big thing. And most people resist really writing out their ideal average schedule, because they don't want to come to terms with the stuff they're going to have to say no to.
Right.
They don't want to come to terms with the reality of the situation that they're in. So it was like I was coaching a mom last year, and she kept struggling with not getting stuff done and hating her life and all this other kind of stuff. And what we realized is she was trying to live this perfect 5-day schedule, yet she had 4 kids.
Yeah.
Now, with kids, right? Like there's something happening every week, right? Like one day every week is like out the window, right? Especially with 4 little kids, right? Like somebody's getting emotional. I mean, who knows what's happening, right? Like somebody broke their finger and you got to run to school. Like kids are nuts. I love them, but they're crazy. So she was living this hallucination that she was going to have 5 perfect days every week, even though she had 4 kids. So what we did was we go, this is never going to work. Right? We're living in this I'm going to be superwoman tomorrow kind of mentality. And what we did was we built out her perfect 4-day schedule. And if she gets a 5th day, that's like an awesome bonus, and it's going to be amazing. But for her, we had to build out, hey, here's your 4-day schedule. And if you get that 5th day, cool. And if you don't, that's okay. So I think a lot of it goes back to just gaining clarity. I believe most anxiety is lack of clarity. Right? Yes. I've got so much to do today. Freaking out doesn't add any more time. What lowers anxiety is when I go, hey, here's the most important things, and here's what I'm going to do them. So does that help?
Absolutely. Something that I'm a serial to-do list maker, and something that you really helped me through was, I constantly have this list of things to do that I hallucinate and think I'm going to get it all done in one day. And then the next day I'm writing a to-do list, and it's like half of the things that I didn't do, moving them over. And then that list just keeps growing and growing and growing. Right. So it's like really breaking down that ideal day, and not necessarily the task, but the blocks of time and where you're going to do things is
Yeah.
so much more productive. It's so much more productive.
Yeah.
And trust me, I am, again, another one that resisted schedules. I don't like people telling me where I need to be and what I need to do, even though I created my own schedule. It's very bizarre. Like you said, we kind of
Yeah.
resist our schedule. It's very weird as an entrepreneur and a leader, because we want to just keep moving forward. And sometimes we feel like those things are holding us back when we're in these blocks.
Amen. Yes.
But it is
Well, and I don't
mind,
think there's one size. Oh, sorry. I was gonna say I
no,
don't think there's one size fits all when it comes to schedule. You know,
right.
so a lot of times when I'm working with someone, it takes us a little while to figure out their ideal schedule. Somebody might
Mhm.
need an hour of just do whatever the heck you want time in their schedule. But what you're referring to is what's so cool is once you dial that in, you can actually be where you are because now it's intentional, right?
Right.
So a schedule that matches your goals gives you the freedom to be where you are. So if
Mhm.
I'm working on this project, I can be free to be there and I'm not freaking out about the other thousand things that I could be doing in that moment. And most of my life, I lived in that state of like anxiety no matter what I was doing. Now I live in freedom of, hey, I'm supposed to be on this call. It's in my schedule. There's nowhere else I'm supposed to be right now. I'm 100% free to be right here present. And
Mhm.
that's a beautiful gift that you give yourself. So
Yeah, I love that. And when we talk about, schedules, I used to just overcommit. I had things back to back to back, and I'd be running late and then late to the next one, and then that creates more anxiety. We think, I realize I'm not an Elon Musk. I can't do little bits of 10 minutes. If I have a break, I'm doing something else. I'm an introvert at heart, and I need a relaxing time. I need time to unwind from one conversation to the next.
yeah,
So I started to really give myself grace in my schedule and more time in between appointments. And it's
yeah.
been the most amazing breakthrough, knowing that I don't have to jam pack it. It's just about being intentional.
So beautiful. Yeah. Well, and if you're watching this, write down these 4 P's. There's 4 P's that I use a lot. And the first one, especially when it comes to time and self-management, the first one is like plan and prepare, right? So plan, prepare. So plan is, let's say that you're gonna start a new schedule, or you're getting up early in the morning, go to the gym. Like plan, prepare would be like, set the alarm. Where am I gonna go? Do I know what I'm doing? All that, right? So we plan and we prepare, lay out the clothes, whatever it is. Then the third P that we always skip is practice. So we go plan, prepare, and we skip right to the fourth one, which is process, right? I'm getting up at 4:30 and I'm going to the gym, right? I've never done that before, but tomorrow, right, Superman is going to show up, right? So we plan, we prepare, but we don't give ourselves a practice phase to figure out what works for us. So
Mhm.
my challenge for most people is like, let's not practice phase for 30 years, but we might practice phase for a couple weeks. It made me, I need to set 2 alarms. Maybe I need to get an accountability partner. Maybe I need to just like, let's plan, prepare, then practice before we establish what's our process. Like, so for you, your day is different than somebody else's, right? You planned, you
Right.
prepared, then we practiced and tweaked and you looked into it and then you go, okay, this is pretty awesome. Now that's what we can roll with. So give yourself time to practice before you just go name it and claim it.
Absolutely. And I love your philosophy of leave yourself no homework. This has been something I have implemented across the board. And again, talking about that schedule, right? When you have all these appointments back to back and you have all these notes of things that you have to do from that appointment, right? Things you have to
Yeah.
send, emails, whatever it is, and you don't leave yourself enough time to do it immediately in that moment. You
Yes.
get overwhelmed at night, right? You put the kids to bed and you're working till midnight.
Yeah.
And, that's something, share a little bit more about that philosophy on no homework.
Oh my gosh, changed my life. So
Yeah.
I use here's what I use, and write this down. Every frustration is an indication. Right. So frustration is an indication. So frustration of like it's 9 o'clock at night and I got 18 things I promised I would do for people. So I used to teach bold, all day long. And I'd be in some city, I'd fly in, I'd teach all day long and then immediately go to the airport and fly somewhere else. And what would happen is I would give myself all this homework throughout the day. People would come up to me and go, hey, can you do this? Or can you send me this? And I would get to the airport and I'd have this huge list of like homework. I was like, this is crazy. What am I doing? What?
Yeah.
So I adopt this philosophy of like no homework. So like, like if you and I are on a coaching call and I go, I'll send you that form. I literally send you that form right there. Or
Yeah.
I fire the email off or I give you the contact information, whatever it is. My philosophy is don't leave with homework. Let's say, and even if it was like a project I need to do, I would immediately put that on my schedule, or put it somewhere so it's not a homework item. So yeah, that is huge. And like you said, if
Yeah.
I've got a 30-minute meeting, I really want to make it 25 minutes. So I've got 5 minutes to do whatever we just talked about. If I've got an
Absolutely.
hour meeting, I really want it to be 50 minutes. So I've got 10 minutes to do whatever we talked about doing. So I'm not dragging around this huge pile of homework all the time. That also forced me to not overcommit. So
Yeah.
like if someone calls and says, "Hey, I need to update my billing," I go, "That's phenomenal. Here's Lydia's email information. Go talk to Lydia." It's almost
Right.
like I'm not touching it, right? It's like
Right.
obligated. Like, nope, not mine. Right? Like I'm not taking. I have a job, right? Like I don't need any more. So that's part of it. So my two philosophies: no homework, and then for me, leave nothing to memory. So a lot of my struggle was trying to remember things, and
Mhm.
it was just a really bad use of my brain space. So I my no homework, and leave nothing to memory. So every time if there's something I need to remember, I put it in a safe place. I put it on my could should must list. I do something with it, so I leave nothing to memory. Which is yeah, my opportunity.
Ah, amazing. And that's been something that's been incredible for me too, is that homework, because I was that person, putting the kids to bed and working till midnight on follow-up emails or sending out things that I could have just done in that moment. Like you said, just firing it off. And like now the team knows if they just get a one sentence email, it's not because I'm being abrasive or abrupt. It's just really that one, leaving no homework. It really
Amen.
is that
Yes.
leaving no homework
Yeah.
philosophy. So you
Yeah.
just touched
Huge.
on the could, should, must list.
Yeah.
And this is something we just implemented with the sales team and they're loving it. So share with us what that could, should, must list is.
Oh my gosh, you're hitting on all my pet peeves. My what I There's not much I hate more than to do list,
Right.
because for most people they have this to do list, but for a lot of people, especially like you and I, their to do list looks like they're starting a book, right? It's like a manifesto, right?
Yeah.
Right? It's like, holy cow, right? Like if you live to
Yeah.
100, we might get done what you wrote down yesterday,
Yeah.
right? But the biggest problem with the to do list is, like we said earlier, time management only works if it's supported by priority management. The problem
Right.
with the to-do list is everything on a to-do list typically looks somewhat equal. So what do? We avoid things that are hard. We do the things that give us that immediate dopamine hit, even if it's not the most important thing. So I realized that to-do list was really, and there's always stuff left over. So what I realized was helpful for me is having, and I basically have three columns on a piece of paper or a Word doc, and it's here's what I could do, here's what I really should do, and here's what I must do.
Hmm.
So my could do is there's a lot on the could do list. From that could do list, I force myself to take just a handful of things, 6 to 10 things, whatever, and put them on the should do list. And then
Hmm.
from that should do list, I'm only allowed to put 3 to 4 things on the must do column. And when I
Yeah.
get those must done, then I can go grab some more shoulds, and then I can go to coulds, whatever it is. But those must, because here's what was interesting. I kept asking people what would make it a hell yeah day? Like what would make, this day a hell yeah day? And it was almost impossible for them to answer. And what we realized is if we could come up with, there's 100 things they could do, but there's usually 2 to 3 that were like critical. So if we
Right.
can identify the 2 or 3 that were critical, and at the end of the day, even if they didn't get everything else done, it's like, hell yeah. It was a hell yeah day because I got the
Yeah.
3 critical things done that are moving me forward. I didn't get everything done, but I give myself a pat on the back for getting the critical things done. And it's hard because, but you
Yes.
get better and better at that skill. But that was a big one for me, was forcing myself to get away from the 20 could do's,
Hmm.
and going down to the 3 or 4 must. And yet it changes the energy and helps a lot of entrepreneurs feel much better about what they're doing.
Absolutely. And this is something, again, that I said I was a serial to-do list maker in multiple notebooks, right?
Yeah,
Very
yeah,
confused of what was going on. And, having those must is so big because, we're big on celebrating a hell yeah day.
yeah,
And, if you get those 3 to 4 things done, like you feel accomplished. And it's
yeah,
so much better than looking at this laundry list and then you're just crossing through, but there's nothing prioritized. So it's
yeah.
been so key too. So I
No,
appreciate you with that.
oh, beautiful.
Another thing I want to touch on is something you and I talk about all the time. And I feel like a lot of people listening are in this phase of their business, right? Their business is going great. but that fun phase, that we're in this predictable success phase now, and this is something you've been coaching me through for the last probably 6 or 7 months, is what does predictable success look like, and how can leaders really really embrace this predictable success phase?
Oh man, what a huge question. And I don't know if I can share, but I'll throw it up here if I yeah, I don't know if this is going to work or not. I'll try. Yeah, here we go. I'll throw it on the screen just for a second
Okay.
if I can. Um,
Awesome.
but really, what you realize is there's these different phases of business, and this comes from the book Predictable Success. So I didn't write this, but I think it's brilliant. Um, and they kind of talk about, there's early struggle. Early struggle phase is kind of, am I going to survive, right? Like, I want to be a realtor, or I want to be a lawyer, or whatever it is, right? Like, can I make money at this? Can I survive? Like, is this actually a job, right? Then once we get through the early struggle, we get into, it's not necessarily fun, but it's kind of the fun phase.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, holy cow, this is working. Like, we actually made some money. Some people, like, it's like there's some cool things happening. Like, we can actually do this, right? And in the fun phase is usually when it's kind of like an all hands on deck mentality, right? It's like, your brother's doing the drafting, and mom is doing some of the accounting. Right? It's just kind of like everybody just grab a shovel and help, right? The problem is the fun phase is not predictable, and it leads to a lot of burnout and frustration. So
Right.
you look at, like, all hands on deck, kind of sounds like a good, like, hey, we're all going to pitch in, we're all going to help. It sounds nice, but the problem is, there's a lot of vague expectations and
Mhm.
not clear agreements.
Right.
Also, there's no predictability in your business, and all this stuff. So like what we've talked about is, we've got to go from fun to predictable success, which means we get to go through whitewater, which is about as fun as it sounds, by the way. Whitewater is not super fun, but
Yeah, it's fun.
yeah, exactly. So whitewater is where, like, we need to build out tracking. Whitewater
Mhm.
is where, what are our standards? Whitewater is, okay, who's doing what? What's the kind
Mhm.
of the accountability we need to have? All of those things. Um, and most people get into whitewater, it gets rough, and they just retreat back to the fun phase. That's
Right.
why there's 7,000 one-man shows, right? There's
Mhm.
7,000 companies where it's Bob and his one assistant, Bob the plumber and his one apprentice, but it never grows beyond that, because they aren't able to get through the whitewater phase. They go, it wasn't that bad back there, so they just retreat instead of realizing that on the other side it's going to be awesome. So
Right.
our job is to get through the whitewater phase, and predictable success is, here's the meetings we're having throughout the year. Here's how we're tracking the most important things. Here's the accountability we're having. Here's our marketing plan. All those things more dialed in. Yet at the same time, we've got to make sure we don't go all the way to treadmill. Treadmill is where it's so strict that we don't pivot and bob with the market.
Mhm.
Treadmill is where we're not getting great, critical feedback from our clients, or from our team. We're not having healthy conflict. You see, companies like Toys R Us are a good example of, like, treadmill, big rut, and then death rattle. Right? They
Mhm.
weren't attached with what was going on in the world. They thought they were good. They weren't. Everybody loved them, but nobody shopped there. Right? They got into treadmill phase, and led to
Mhm.
death rattle. So our job is to, consistently stay in that predictable success phase.
Yes. And this has been something that's so big for our organization too, because, again, I come from that visionary mindset where I'm like, oh, systems, and, I don't want any of that stuff in place. But once you start growing, you realize, like, some things are necessary, right? So
Yeah.
that accountability is huge. And when you start adding new people to the organization, and people are reaching out to random people, and it's like, how do they not know who to reach out to? And I'm like, oh, that's my fault, that I
Yeah.
need to
Yeah.
go back and get in that white water and put those systems in place. And it's a place that I don't like to be, but it's a place that's so necessary.
Yeah.
I think we have the stigma around it being micromanaging, but there's such a way to deliver it that can be so much better, that it's like, this is necessary for our business
Amen.
forward.
Yes.
And you don't
Yeah.
have to
Well,
get to that treadmill, right? Where it's too
amen.
corporate. It's too corporate and
Yes.
nobody wants to do anything, but it can't be the all hands on deck
Yeah.
forever.
Well, and I think, like what you said, is so important to be able to articulate to your team, to your company, to go, hey, we're going through this. This is really healthy, right?
Mhm.
Like the fact that we're, every time we level up, it's going to create some chaos. That's part of the journey. It's not an
Mhm.
indication we're doing something bad. It's an indication that we're going through this next evolution, and quite frankly, if you're not okay with that, then you shouldn't be part of growing a company, right? But like
Right.
this is part of it. We're going to go into some chaos, and you'll, unfortunately, a lot of times you lose a couple of the early people because they go, we love the fun phase, and we,
Right.
you used to not hold us accountable. We used to not have to turn in our expenses, whatever it is. But you just have to go, look, this is part of the natural progression of growth,
Right.
and getting people on board with that. So it's funny. I think about, and I'm sure we've gone through this graph before, but there's, this graph of like the emotional journey that most
Oh, I
people go
love
through.
this one.
Yeah,
Yes.
I love it too. I don't know who came up with it, but I freaking love it. So like in the beginning, it's like best idea ever. I'm gonna start a title company. This is gonna be awesome, right? Like, why wouldn't I do this? Right? I'm sure you had that
Said
moment,
no
right?
one ever.
Yeah, game on. Yeah, it's gonna be
Yeah.
awesome. And then you're like, this is fun. This is harder than I thought. Like,
Mhm.
this is a lot of work. And then you're like, this sucks. Like, why did I do this? Right? Like, whose idea was this anyway? Right? And then you go to this beautiful place that's called the dark swamp of despair. And that's about how it feels, right? It's
Yeah.
like, what are we doing, right? And yet, when you're in that spot, you go, it wasn't that bad back there. It wasn't that bad when I didn't have a schedule. It wasn't that bad when I didn't have people working for me. It wasn't that bad when I didn't manage my money. Whatever it is, it wasn't that bad when I wasn't in a relationship, right? Whatever it is, we start looking back and go, I think I'll just retreat. Yet the reality is when you get to the dark swamp of despair, like take a breath and realize you're halfway, right? It's like awesome,
Mhm.
right? Like you're halfway there. And then it's like, okay, this is tough, but it's getting a little bit better. Hey, I think this is gonna be okay. Wow, this is awesome. And then you get to be one of the things. Then you get to be someone who's really proud of themselves. So, but
Mhm.
just realizing this is part of the journey, right? You go, all right, I'm gonna start having a great schedule. Welcome to the journey, right? It's
Yeah.
gonna be a minute, you know what I mean, right? So, I love that. I think that it's very helpful when we realize this is just part of it, right?
Right.
Like I'm not broken when I'm on the dark zone of despair. I'm on the path.
Right. Oh, I love that. This is one of my favorite charts because I can literally remember the moments that I was in those certain phases. So
Yes.
that's amazing. So I hope that you guys are getting some good nuggets from it. But I know we're wrapping up and we don't have much more time, but I want to see, what could you leave some people with, especially, maybe people that are shifting from that in that whitewater phase, they're trying to move to that predictable success phase. What's one thing you can do to really keep themselves moving forward, some ideas to stay in action and stay in that white water and get to that predictable success phase?
Man, I think that it comes back to, and I think that this is a lot of what happened in the last couple of years. A lot of people, we live. Let me say it this way: we live life kind of in a snow globe, and that snow globe is like shooken up all the time. And
Mhm.
when it's going on, and the proof is, we get in the car, the radio's on. We get home, the TV's on. The kids are like, our life is going, 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 going all the time. In the last year or two, a lot of people let the snow settled a little bit, and they
Mhm.
were able to look around and go, either this is in line with where I want to go, or this isn't, or wow, there's an opportunity there I didn't even know about. So I think for a lot of people, it's take a moment, make sure you're letting the snow settle for a second, and craft your version of radical, unapologetic success, right? Which is like the theme of our summit in October.
Yeah.
Um, Radical, unapologetic success, and it is kind of going right. What does radical mean? Radical means it's probably my version of success is probably different from somebody else. It might be, homeschooling in an RV and taking your kids on the road for the next years. Whatever it is, what's your version of radical? Unapologetic is I'm going to do right by me. Who am I letting dictate my decisions? And make
Mhm.
sure that I'm doing stuff in alignment with myself. There's a stat that says 70% of the small amount of people that do come to your funeral, 70% of them will decide to come to your graveside based on the weather that day.
Wow.
So it's like, who am I trying to impress? Right? Like
Yeah, that's
is
incredible.
this my version of success? And then really being able to articulate that. So what's your version of radical, unapologetic success? And make sure you take a moment to really kind of figure out what that is. and then begin to build a life in alignment with that, I think is huge. And most people live in one dimensional success. One area of their life is going good, and the other areas are all out of whack. And so what we do, especially in coaching, is figure out, how do we have multi-dimensional success? How do we have a calendar that matches not just your business goals, but the relationship and the health? And it takes a minute to get that together. But if you're feeling out of alignment, if you're feeling frustrated, let that be an indication to take a moment and figure out, how do I get back in alignment? What's my version of radical unapologetic success? And then write out that version of, who do you want to be a year from now? A year from now, who do I want to be? What life do I want to live? And then every day, am I voting to be that person, or am I voting to stay the way I was? And I think keeping that in front of you at all times is really, really critical.
So critical. And, what I'm hearing from you, there's so much on clarity, right? Clarity on your values, clarity on where you want to go, writing those things down and making sure that your schedule, you're designing this life, right? Life by design.
Yeah.
And not being reaction, having that reaction come in. So that kind of stuff is so big for me. One last question for you, since our word of the month is legacy, I feel like, a lot of people don't talk about legacy enough, right? And, life doesn't promise us tomorrow, but, what does legacy mean to you, and what sort of legacy do you want to leave?
Man, well, it gave me goosebumps thinking about it. The first off is, the activity that I would challenge everyone to do is write their eulogy.
Okay.
What do you want your eulogy to sound like? Was it like, Wayne was a nice guy that worked a ton of hours? Or like, what do you want on there? Or is it, Amanda was someone that I always knew was there for me. Amanda was someone who was like tough, and yet that changed my life. Amanda was someone who saw my greatness and fought for it, right? Like, what do you want said at your funeral? What do you want that legacy to be? So I think that's part of it. I think another big piece is, this is something happened to me about a year ago. I was reading my son a book, right? He's in bed, and I'm laying there with him, and I'm reading him a book, and the book is about heroes, great heroes, right? All these different heroes over time. And what hit me was, would I want my story in this book? Would I want him to read my story, and would it be a story I was really proud of or not?
Oh, I love
right?
that.
And like, every hero went through some stuff, right? And I want him to read my story and go, like, there was this challenge and he went through it. There was this obstacle, and he overcame it. We struggled. Like, is your story a heroic story that you would be proud of? Or is like, yeah, they showed up and kind of mailed it in.
Right.
So I think that's a big thing. And then for true leaders, when I think of legacy, I think of teaching people how to think. And I think that's one thing you're so good at, is you don't always just, sometimes you have to tell people what to do, but it's not always just telling people what to do or what to think. It's teaching them how to think. How do we determine our yeses and our nos? How did you arrive at that answer? How do I, so I think it's so cool for, as leaders, to go like, here's the principles that I've taught you. Here's the ways of thinking. And I think that's a really powerful way to leave a legacy.
I love that. Yeah. And just remembering, like, the legacy is created in all of our experiences every single day, and how you communicate with people. And, it can be as small as making an impact of just being kind, and that compounds over time. So I love that. I love our calls. I love everything that you've done for my team. If you could just share real quick, and I'll put it in the chat as well. If somebody wants to connect with you, how would they do that?
Yeah, the easiest way is go on Instagram and send me a message, just Wayne Salmans, nice and easy. Or go to theheronation.com and check us out there. I'd love for everybody to, if you're struggling with recovery, or how do I get back up, or how do I kind of be my own hero, because I love you, everybody can go get that for free if they want to. They can download it, theheronation.com/book, and you can download that for free. Or go on Amazon and buy 1,000 copies for every one of your friends. Either way, it's powerful. That's just my gift. I think would help everyone.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, my friend.
For all you've done, and looking forward to talking to you again soon. So thanks, guys.
And I'll throw all that.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Bye, my friend.